Well, we welcome you back, our listeners, our viewers on the various platforms of Salam Media this evening on Wednesday nights in conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi. And this evening we are raising the question, Trump's plan, is it the board of peace or is it a board of war criminals? And the reason why we are raising this question is how much more wicked, how much more evil can this actually get? Because is there a limit to with this most horrendous evil that we've seen that world leaders are committing to become or to be on this board of peace? And we've seen after 2 years of committing the most inhumane genocide and accompanied by starvation, by rape, by dismembering children, men, women, weaponizing food and water, basic human amenities that have been denied. And now we see this huge focus on the board of peace. And this is what we're going to be focusing on tonight with my guest, Nasim Ahmed, who is a political analyst with the Middle East Monitor, and Dr. Ahmed Jazbhay, a researcher at Media Review Network. As we await both my guests to appear on screen, Nasim Ahmed and also Dr. Ahmed Harun Jazbhay, to both of you. I see Dr. Jazbhay is on. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam, Inayat. Shukran for having me.
Yes, and to you as well, Nasim Ahmed, Jazakallah to you as well for joining us. Your time is much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Nasim, let's start off with you. And obviously, I raise the question, board of peace or board of war criminals? Because we've seen just so much being said at this point in time, so much being lauded by Donald Trump and all those who have actually now joined this board of peace. Just your initial thoughts to set the tone for the discussion this evening.
Yeah, well, I mean, you set the stage really nicely. Is it board of peace or board of war criminals? I think it's self-evident that it's a board of war criminals. You have, first and foremost, Tony Blair, who many would say should be in The Hague, tried for war crimes because of his invasion of Iraq and his role in the killing of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Iraqis. And then you have, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli prime minister, who is a wanted war criminal. The ICC has issued a arrest warrant for him. And then you have many other, authoritarian leaders from around the world for known for their various human rights abuse. So I think if we just take a look at the figureheads in this board of so-called peace, is actually a board of war criminals. So that's my initial thought. I mean, I can add more afterwards, but I think it's quite self-evident that this is a board of war criminals. I don't think it is fit for purpose. It will not achieve the goals it's set out to achieve, because for a number of reasons, which we can get to later on. It lacks the legitimacy. It does not have the framework, and Trump is seeking to use it, deploy it, and weaponize it for something other than it's meant to achieve. So there are various other factors we can get to later on, but these are my initial thoughts about whether it's a board of peace or a board of war criminals.
Well, Nasim, I must apologize. I see they put you down as Nasim Jazbhay, researcher at Media Review Network. I will ask Sadiq to obviously amend that as well, because you are a political analyst with the Middle East Monitor. So hopefully, Sadiq, if you could just please change it to Nasim Ahmed. Dr. Ahmed Harun, in fact, just following up from what Nasim is saying as well, and just to get your initial thoughts on, your reading and what you've observed until now, since this board of peace was announced and now that it is being firmly established.
I think, Inayat, we must understand that after being denied the Nobel Peace Prize by the Nobel Committee a few months ago, Trump has become board of peace, and now has decided to take off the mask, if there ever was one to begin with. The board of peace, the so-called board of peace, is a cynical attempt by the American-Israeli empire. We can call it the board of empire, the board of occupation, the board of coloniality, whatever the case may be, but it's anything but a board of peace. And I'm sure we'll come to this later on, but in my opinion, that it is attempt to begin the process of sidelining the United Nations. It's clear the United Nations, despite the United States having a veto power and being able to protect the Israeli entity at every turn, is not working to the extent that it should be working on behalf of empire. And despite its undemocratic nature, the United Nations Security Council is still not acting on behalf of the US and doing whatever the US wants it to be. It's all about national interest and little to do with peace.
Well, certainly. Also, Nasim, I think, I actually saw a very interesting quote the other day, and looking at the composition of this board of peace, and you cited Tony Blair, and there are many others who have been actively complicit in genocide. We know what Tony Blair and his involvement in Iraq as well, and there are many like him. And I think this comment is actually very, very appropriate, and especially even with somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu, who I believe, is going to be a member of this board of peace. It's actually like putting somebody like Hitler on a board for Holocaust victims.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there are characters, very unsavory characters, people who, as I said, should be in The Hague, facing war crime charges. I think I think we need to understand is where this is coming from. What is the instinct behind this board of peace, and why is it that individuals who are seen in the eyes of most people around the world as being war criminals and should be in The Hague? Why is it that these are the people who are part of this so-called board of peace? Because ultimately, this board is serving a much bigger agenda. There was a conference in Jerusalem yesterday, a confab of various European leaders from the far right, trying to tackle anti-Semitism. So one after another, they condemned the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. You had the previous Austrian prime minister who said that there's a new form of anti-Semitism that is being brought to Europe by Muslims, forgetting the fact that Austria played a role in the Holocaust and genocide of Jews in Europe. They are saying now, Europeans, that Muslims are bringing anti-Semitism, and there is a civilizational war. There is a replacement of Europeans taking place by Muslims migrating to Europe. And then you had Mike Huckabee, who said that the UN is the most anti-Semitic institution in the world. So you've got the scapegoating of Muslims and you've got the bashing of international institutions. So you've got two things happening here. And those two things, as Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, said last week in Davos, the same platform where the Board of Peace was launched, he said, we are in a moment of rapture, not a transition, saying that we have reached a point where the world is taking a different turn. And you've got people like European leaders I mentioned who are in Jerusalem yesterday in this conference. They are trying to present an existential threat to Europe, and at the same time saying that the current world system with the United Nations, with the various other institutions, it's not working for us, and we have to create a new world order. And Trump is really at the spearhead of this, and this Board of Peace is really the first manifestation, I would say, proper concrete manifestation of recreating a world order to deal with what many in the far right, European far right, see as a civilizational conflict with Muslims. That's where this is coming from, and that's why you have some of the most unsavory characters joining this Board of Peace, because its main objective, as I said, it's driven by hate, it's driven by a civilizational conflict, an idea of a civilizational conflict, and if you're persuaded by this, then you will be the kind of person that joins Trump's Board of Peace. Of course, it's not a Board of Peace, as we know. It's more of a board of chaos, a board designed to undermine international law and destroy the current global order.
Yes, Dr. Jazbhay, I think, just following up from what Nasim is saying, and to give legitimacy to this board of peace. And, this whole question about redefining what the new world order should look like. Because when one looks at this board of peace, and when one looks at the countries that have now joined this board of peace, including a number of Muslim countries. Now, we've seen it in the last few years throughout this genocide, where many resolutions, the UN, whether we're talking of the UN General Assembly, whether we're talking of the Security Council as well, and all these resolutions, they were vetoed by the United States of America. And these are now are the same countries, the same governments, the same leadership who are actually prepared to serve under the United States, under somebody like Donald Trump, who had vetoed resolution after resolution as far as Gaza was concerned in the United Nations. So again, this raises huge questions with regard to international institutions like the UN, but also in terms of the world order that we are living under.
Yes, I would add to what Nasim has said. This is not merely it is a clash of civilizations 2.0. I would point out, a la Samuel Huntington, but I don't even Huntington could have conceived in a way in which Trump is trying to redefine the world order. And building upon this, we must understand that, as Nasim said, when he spoke about the clash of civilization, that white supremacy is in decline. And Trump is acting on behalf of white supremacist movements the world over, be it in Argentina, be it in Europe, in other parts of the world, to try to arrest the decline of white supremacy. The membership of the Board of Peace is a joke. Netanyahu was mentioned, Trump, Blair, even Putin has been invited. It's quite astonishing. The type of unsavory characters that have been involved. Some countries, I think, have taken the stance that they rather be on the inside than be out on the cold, challenging the global, trying to preserve the global order, which countries like South Africa and other countries in the global south are trying to do, an imperfect and a colonial world order, in my opinion, but many are still trying to fight to preserve that global order. And other countries have said, like Morocco and so on, said we rather be on the inside, be on Trump good terms. If this does work out, if successive American administrations build upon this plan of a new world order under, the so-called Board of Peace and Board of Empire and so on, that we rather be on the inside. And I think many countries have taken that stance, to rather be on the inside, and as opposed to be out of the cold. South Africa hasn't been invited, fortunately, and obviously it wouldn't have accepted such an invite, given that South Africa is an advocate of preserving the current global order, moving towards a more multilateral world and so on. So it'll be interesting to see what next for the board of Empire, how it manages to focus on its core mandate. It started in the context of Gaza, yet now it has metamorphed quite quickly into supposedly Damascus come outside quickly, and to replace the UN. Trump has officially denied it. He says that the UN has uses, but it's not working how it should be. So Trump has officially denied, but I think the wheels are in motion already, and it will be interesting to see how this pans out.
Well, certainly, and also, we'd like to see, Nasim, in terms of the Palestinians, and what does this actually mean for the people of Palestine as well. And there was this interesting article that appeared in the Middle East Monitor talking about the Gaza Board of Peace, The title, very, very interesting, calling it a circus to normalize a new phase of mass dispossession and genocide. Now, that these few words actually speak volumes because nothing has changed, nothing will change for the people of Palestine in terms of their end game. And their end game, obviously, is freedom, liberation, and to get their land back.
Yeah, so before I speak about Palestine, I think I just want to make a quick point about the legitimacy of this so-called Board of Peace. As my other guest has mentioned, it's the legitimacy is originally the UN resolution that gave the mandate in November was to for the board to manage the situation in Gaza, and the mandate is up to 2027, which is just next year. But that's morphed into something more than that. So we don't really know what will happen after 2027 when the mandate ends. Will Trump insist in creating or preserving this entity, which is an entity, as we said, challenges the UN? Returning to Gaza, there is no illusion that this will change the situation on the ground. Israel has been bombing Gaza nearly every single day since the so-called ceasefire came into effect, and killing Palestinians every single day. And this board has this National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. There will be something like 15 members. There's one or two Palestinians who will serve as a fig leaf for this committee. This committee will answer to the Gaza Executive Board, and its members again are the same members more or less of the Executive Board of the Board of Peace. You've got people like Marco Rubio, Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Tony Blair, and many others. Blair today said that Palestinians will only be delivering on the provisions on the ground. They will have no political say or on the running of Gaza, on the management of Gaza. So we don't really know how this is going to work. And on the other hand, you have Israel, who is insisting that anyone who has any link to Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, they cannot serve in this board. So that automatically disqualifies every single Palestinian who is in Gaza. So what you'll end up with is a scenario like the de-Baathification of Iraq, where you have a complete hollowing out of Iraq and then imposition of unknown entities to govern Iraq, and we know how that went. So I think the question now is, even if you have this National Committee for the Administration of Gaza installed, who are the Palestinians that will work there when you have Israeli criterion, where Israel gets to veto whoever joins this committee, a criterion where really no Palestinian can work or function other than the ones Israel vets and says, yes, you can have this person. And we know what kind of people Israel will permit. These probably be the militias and the gangsters who have been killing Palestinians, stealing their food over the past 2 years, stealing aid. So on the ground, I cannot fathom a scenario where it's actually going to function. There is no way it's going to function because the main goal of this does not meet the basic criterion of anything resembling an aid organization or as such. Sorry, yeah.
Well, certainly, Nasim. And also, I think Dr. Jazbhay, in terms of not meeting the most basic criterion, as Nasim alludes to as well, again, what this is actually doing is actually rewarding the most genocidal maniac of our time, somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu. And again, this whole Zionist cause of expansionism, how this is actually enshrined through this Board of Peace as well. So from a Palestinian perspective, really, again, there's going to be profiteering, with Gaza, without accountability, delegitimizing and discrediting the Palestinian cause as a whole.
Yeah, of course, the Israelis have not lost track or lost sight of their ultimate goal, which is the so-called Greater Israel Project, and Gaza is phase one. To neutralize Gaza Strip is to and to ultimately push them into the Sinai Peninsula. So it's very important that we don't lose sight of this. To neutralize this Board of Peace and its various subsidiaries. I think there are 4 subsidiaries or three subsidiaries when it comes to to this border peace is about the ultimate end goal: push Palestinians into the Sinai Peninsula. Lebanon is largely neutralized. Syria is neutralized. We know Jordan and Egypt were lost a long time ago, and Gaza is the last frontier to expand Israel's borders. Interesting enough, Israel is the only country admitted to the United Nations without clearly defined borders. And which is why, and it was it is something that it was done on purpose. And Trump spoke about it. Trump said that Israel is a very small country. In fact, to put it in the South African context, Israel can fit 4 times into the Kruger National Park, our largest game reserve. And so that's how small Israel is. So its present borders are too small, and we must keep an eye on this. While many are celebrating so-called 3 months of this of a ceasefire, Nasim pointed out that almost every day Palestinians have been killed. The number is just around 1,700, including 11 in a single day last week. And I believe there was an airstrike somewhere in Gaza City this morning. So the genocide is ongoing. We're back to an incremental genocide. And we're in a full-blown genocide. We're back to an incremental genocide, ultimately to enhance, to further this greater Israel project. And Trump knows this. He's at the whims of his Zionist sponsors, chief amongst them Miriam Adelson, who gives him all the money and resources that he does. His allies are bought of TikTok and so on. This is all about furthering the agenda of arresting the decline of white supremacy, as well as ensuring that the Greater Israel Project does not lose steam. The ethnic cleansing of Gaza, or Palestine in general, still remains the core focus of the Israeli entity. Flattening Gaza, which what the Israeli public wants, is still at the core focus of Israel. So, Board of Peace, the National Committee for the Reconstruction of Gaza will not be reconstructed. And Hamas, if it is successfully disarmed, and this will add another nail in the coffin. For example, in the fate of Gaza, if one can put it quite crudely.
Nasim, apart from just some of the personalities who are on the board of peace, I'm just looking at countries and governments that have now joined this board of peace, and just to understand the disconnect. Because on the one side, we've got this board of peace, and many countries obviously clamoring to be part and parcel of this board of peace. Yet we see what has been playing out recently with regard to Trump and his plans as far as Greenland is concerned, the spat with NATO. We've seen so much taking place in that part of the world, and this is where we see this disconnect, where they would oppose Trump when it comes to Greenland, when it comes to the board of peace, and when it comes to control of Gaza, again, supportive of Trump. And, how does one actually make sense of these countries and these governments and these leaders around the world that support Trump when they want to, and they won't support him when they don't want to?
Well, of course, there's deep underlying hypocrisy there. When Venezuela was attacked, many of these European countries, they expressed their opposition. With Greenland, more so, it was an attack on sovereignty. It was an undermining of international law, forgetting the fact that Gaza is what broke the floodgates, and Gaza is what allowed a world where, a lawless world. Gaza is what opened this up, but no one wants to admit that fact. So Europeans recognize, I think, there is hypocrisy there, but they don't want to acknowledge that. But ultimately, they realize that this is really a existential threat for themselves, because if the Americans are recreating a world to benefit U.S. interest, it means what is the role left for Europeans? If America is going to weaponize its trade deals with Europeans, if it's going to impose tariffs, if it's going to threaten the Europeans, Europeans now have a decision to make. Is this the kind of America we can live with? Okay, it may be Trump now, but who can assure that this is not going to be an ongoing phenomenon? Who knows where the US is heading? So there are now questions being asked in Europe itself, that we need to decouple. We need to become more self-sufficient. We need to have our own independent technological farms with technological devices, and be more independent, not so reliant. So that discussion is already taking place. So I think in the long term, this will weaken Trump and America generally. Why some Arab countries, for example, are taking part in this charade? I guess, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned earlier, I think some of them, the calculation could be that, it's better to be in there, have a say with regards to Gaza. But because there's most of the countries, I don't think Trump expected so many countries would reject the proposal and European countries would stay away. Now this is really a busted flush. There is no way of delivering anything when you have 90%, more than 90% of the countries, UN member states, staying away from this, and the mandate is only for 1 year. So how is this going to address the issue of Palestine when none of the core issues of Palestine is even mentioned? There is no mention about occupation. There is no mention about Palestinian sovereignty. There is no mention about the right of return. So you have this vehicle to address the Palestinian question, but without answering any of the core Palestinian issue regarding Israel's occupation, regarding us as refugees, and all the other core issues. So this is inevitably going to fail. And I think once people realize, we've gone along this path, we need something different. I think we will come up with something better, in the sense that people will realize you have the global South recognizing that US power cannot be trusted. You have Europeans realizing American power cannot be trusted and relied upon. And I think now you're seeing in the Middle East as well, Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, also recognizing that an imperial Israel is an existential threat, and they have to now pose a challenge to imperial Israel. So I think everyone will realize they have a role to play. They need to wake up to the fact that there is an agenda there, an agenda to make Israel the imperial power and change the world in the favor of Israel and US imperialism. And unless these countries wake up, including the Europeans, they will have to basically be servitude to Israel, be servitude to the US, and prostrate and bow to these countries. And they have to really take on the responsibility and the duty of becoming real states. They have to think about their own sovereignty. They have to create new partnership and new deals with other countries, so that they can pose a challenge. Middle countries can pose a challenge to US hegemony and US might. Unless they do that, they will basically become vassals of the US. And I think this conversation is now taking place because Trump has done what he has done. So that's the positive, I think, that's going to come out of this.
Yes, but also I think, Dr. Jazbhay, when you spoke about the greater Israeli project as well, and from what Nasim is talking about, Israel being the imperial power in the region, and the fact that a number of the Arab governments and a number of Muslim governments have actually joined this board of peace, do they realize what could be in store for them in the long term, and what consequences they could suffer as a result of what we see playing out?
Yeah, I think they've done their calculations, or miscalculations rather, that, many of the Arab countries have always been firmly on the side of Trump, and the side of the US empire, for many decades. So they understand, for them, Palestine does not feature on the radar. Palestine is of little importance to much of the Arab world in terms of the leadership. In the leadership, the people are firmly behind the Palestinian cause, which constrains the ability of the leadership to really overtly, support the Israeli entity. Besides, bin Zayed in the UAE, who even said that if he even said that if he could do what he wants, he would overtly state that he wants Palestine crushed. He wants nothing to do with Palestine, but it's just that the Emirati population still holds Palestine close to its heart. So much of the Arab world do not want to be left out in the crisis, in the cold. Their very existence is premised on adherence to American empire, and by extension, tolerating the existence of the state of Israel. Trump, if my memory serves me correct, did mention something to this effect not too long ago, that the Arab world knows, where and which side to be on. Bin Salman has pledged almost $1 trillion in investments, which made Trump very happy and allowed him to tolerate anything that Bin Salman escapades in Yemen and other parts of the Muslim world. So I think most of the Muslim world, including Pakistan, their very existence is premised on adherence to empire and allegiance to empire. They've done their calculations. They know that their population is against it, but the population won't rise up just yet. And the Palestinian cause is secondary. They will never say it overtly, but the Palestinian cause and the genocide of Gaza is secondary on their radar. It's all about protecting their own thrones and their own governments.
Nasim, just to expand on what Dr. Harun is saying as well, in terms of, what does this actually mean for the broader Muslim world, the Arab world, and, and listening to what Dr. Jazbhay is saying as well, and also taking a look at it both from a political perspective, but also there's an ideological dimension to this.
Well, I think let's start with the Middle East. I think that there's a recognition, start with Saudi Arabia, there's a recognition in the Middle East that no country should be an imperial power in the region. So if you look back for the past 10, 20 years, there was a lot of concern about Iran and its influence in the region. So Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, and most of the Arab Middle Eastern countries were opposed to Iran's influence through its many, you could say, proxies, whether you want to call them that or not, through those proxies in Hezbollah and Yemen and elsewhere. But Iran now is no longer seen as a threat in the way, say, for example, Israel is seen as a threat. Israel, because of the genocide in Gaza, because there is no restraint on Israel, because there is no power that can restrain Israel, has been on a rampage. It's bombed 5 of its neighbors over the last 2 years, not to mention the genocide. I think they realize that an imperial Israel is also not in the interest of the Arab countries. So how do they stop that? How can they deal with an imperial Israel when Washington does not rein in its pawn in the region? So I think there is a recognition that they need to do something. Saudi Arabia now, you will see, is at loggerheads with the UAE, because UAE, according to some Saudi analyst, is just a Israeli Trojan horse in the region, because the UAE, more than anyone else, has been doing Israel's bidding for many, many years now. So I think the way things have been going, as a result of that, Saudi Arabia has recognized that it needs to be more muscular, it needs alliances. So there was conversation about an alliance between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey, and even Egypt. These conversations are taking place, whereas just a few months ago, these conversations were not taking place, but they are taking place because they recognize that the US cannot be trusted. They do not want an imperial Israel in the region, and they need to find a way, a bulwark against a rampaging Israel, and present a real, not just economic challenge, a military challenge to what is the most powerful country in the region because of the backing of the US. So that conversation is taking place. So from a geostrategic analysis, I think the big shift is that change in the mindset. I think there is a recognition that they need a Muslim bulwark against rampaging Israel. Iran is no longer seen as a major threat. And as I said, Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest country in the region, most powerful Gulf country, and symbolically the center of the Muslim world, we can say, if they recognize that they need to build this alliance, I think, as a positive shift away from, you know, individual Muslim countries who are just vassals of the US. I don't think they can sustain that trajectory, which we've seen over the past 40 years, continue the way it has, because America cannot be trusted. Relying on the US for security cannot be trusted. And Israel is now an imperial power, and they need to present and pose a challenge. And I think the calculation is that they need to do that. And we will see that, I think, that conversation taking place at least.
Yes. Dr. Jazbhay, this alliance that Nasim speaks about, we're looking at, obviously, these are powerful countries. We're talking about Saudi Arabia, we talk about Turkey, we speak about Pakistan. These are strong countries. These are very, very powerful countries in their own right. Do they have the capacity to stand up to the United States of America, even if this board of peace is constituted and this board of peace is running Gaza as well? But I mean, are they able to stand up so that, the ultimate objective obviously is we'd like to see, peace as far as the people of Palestine would like to see peace. And we know that the resistance in Palestine is not trusting of this board of peace. But at the end of the day, the end game for the Palestinians, again, is this, are they prepared to stand up? Because until now, for 2 years, since this genocide has been unfolding, none of these countries, in fact, they've been impotent, where they were able to do absolutely nothing to stop the slaughter and the mayhem and the carnage and the death, the destruction, the devastation.
These are, as you rightly said, very powerful countries. Pakistan is the only Muslim nuclear power in the world. Turkey had its own power, and bin Salman in Saudi Arabia being a regional hegemon. But at the same time, we know that the government in Pakistan, which came in power to a soft coup, to the overthrow of Imran Khan. Turkey in itself is trying to play both sides. I think it's trying to play for time, but understanding where the real goal is going to. Saudi Arabia, I think, achieved a very big wake-up call when UAE tried to impose an Israeli proxy, if one can call it, the southern separatist group in southern Yemen, right on the Saudi border. So it got a big wake-up call. Bin Salman acted, and he showed some fortitude for once against his once best friend in Bin Zayed. But internally, we know Pakistan has a lot of issues. Turkey has a lot of issues as well internally. This power struggle between the religious as well as the secularists within Turkey. And Bin Salman in Saudi Arabia has many enemies within the royal family, those who he unceremoniously got rid of when his father appointed him the crown prince. And this all came at a cost. But the ability to come together is what is questionable. As I said, I have my doubts because the Palestinian cause does not feature very high on the radar, for example, of the Pakistani and the Saudi. But Turkey is definitely an ally to some extent, but it has severe limitation, geopolitical limitation, internal limitation as to how it can push and how far it can push. Qatar is an ally to some extent, limited extent, hosting Hamas.
Can I just say something about this, Dr. Ahmed Haroon, just quickly? I think it's more, I don't think it's the Palestinian cause that will be the rallying call for why these countries would come together. I think the motivation is that these countries are looking at the global system and looking at their position in that system, and they're realizing that their position in the global system, let alone the region, is going down in the pecking order. Countries like the UAE, countries like Israel are becoming the hegemon, and Saudi Arabia is not going to accept being ruled or controlled by a country like the UAE. Even Israel, I think they want their sovereignty, they want their independence. But when they look at the way the world is going, with Trump at the head, and push and this aggressive, still neo-colonial foreign policy, despite what he says. I think they're looking at this saying, oh, our position, our status in this global order is diminishing. We are weakening relatively to the UAE, to Israel, given that these countries are making moves in the Horn of Africa, making moves in Sudan and all over the region. And they're thinking, no, forget Palestine. For our own survival, we need to come together. For our own sake and our self-interest, to be at least at the same level as we were on the global order, that we need to come together and pose a challenge to Israel, pose a challenge to the UAE, because UAE and Israel together are seeking to redefine and recreate the Middle East. And I would say the service of US and of course Israel. And that's the main motivation. That's the main interest. I don't think the interest is simply Palestine. The interest is, as I said, their place in the global order, which is at stake here.
Yeah,
Yes.
if I just respond in 30 seconds, we're on a similar wavelength here. It's national interest that it's the bedrock of international relations, not, civilizational issues, not Islam, not the Palestinian cause or so on. It's about national interest. How can we position our national interest in relation to an ever-changing world, in relation to geopolitics, in relation to this developing new world order? And I think which is why the ability of Muslim countries, Arab countries, will be largely constrained.
Yes. Nasim, just looking at it from a Palestinian perspective, what does this mean for the Palestinians themselves? Where we know, on the one hand, you've got the West Bank and you've got the Palestinian Authority on the other side. You've got the resistance as well. And in terms of, the Palestinian and their struggle, and with this board of peace that is constituted, where does this leave Palestinians and their great objective for freedom and liberation?
Well, in the short term, when I look at what's happening, I don't see, unfortunately, anything positive in the horizon for Palestine. Israel has committed the biggest crime of our time, a genocide in Gaza without any restraint. It's continuing with the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. So the whole system really is geared in such a way, because of the trauma of the Holocaust, because of the guilt of the Holocaust. Israel is permitted to do what it needs to do for its security interest, even if it means committing a genocide, even if it means carrying out ethnic cleansing. Until that mindset shifts, we will not see any positive signs that the Palestinians will have their rights and their self-determination. The only positive sign I see is that Israel has become a global pariah. Even in the US, if you look at the opinion polls, new generations who will be voting in the next election or the election after that, that there is a shift in the mindset. That even in the Israeli right, they're recognizing Israel has too much sway in the US. So whatever reason, overall, the right and the left, they recognize that Israel is a pariah, and in Europe as well. And we know that culture is upstream from politics. So these cultural shifts that's taken place, especially over the past 2 years, over the Gaza genocide, they will play out into politics in the next few years. That's the only positive sign I see, and that may be the only thing that restrains Israel. And that may be the only thing that shifts the calculations of Europeans to think that we cannot continue with the guilt of the Holocaust. We cannot give Israel carte blanche to do as it pleases. We cannot have an international system where we remain silent while there's a genocide going on. At the moment, because the system has been doing this since the Second World War, you have a generation of people, a class of people who want to give Israel a free rein to do whatever it wants. But until that changes, I don't think there will be much obstacle to Israel continuing its genocide in Gaza and its ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. Even if the Arab countries realize that it poses a threat, there has to be a mind shift, change in the mindset of Europeans who have been providing support and to the Israelis, and that's going to take time. But in the short term, unfortunately, we will continue to see the horrors. We will continue to see the heartbreak that we are seeing in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
But also, Dr. Harun, with somebody like Donald Trump, self-proclaimed egos and king of this board of peace, or the so-called board of peace as well. This is a man that is facing his own challenges as well. And if we go by what is happening in the United States of America as well, internally, ICE, and there's just so much that is taking place in terms of, whether this board of peace will ever succeed in even his lifetime as a president of the United States of America. A lot is taking place right now. So again, one needs to be aware of that as well, because many of these countries that have joined this board of peace have done so on the insistence or by invitation from somebody like Donald Trump. I mean, he's even gone to the extent of inviting somebody like Putin to be part of this board of peace. Yet this war in Ukraine is still taking place. So, there's just so many variables that one can actually read into this on whether this initiative will succeed or it won't succeed.
Yeah, internally, as you point out, Trump is facing a lot of opposition, a lot of challenges. The dollar has weakened substantially since he came into power last January. Unemployment has not improved much, and so on. Economically, the Americans are still facing a cost of living crisis, and so on. So internally, Trump is facing a lot of crises, and he's using now the board of peace and many other challenges externally, the war in Ukraine and so on, to try to mask his internal failure. The abduction and kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro was justified on the grounds that he was a narco terrorist, and these were drugs that were coming into the United States that were killing Americans, and not being used by Americans. So he justified that to his support base, his MAGA support base. So we have to consider that. So, like it or not, the board of peace is going ahead for now. But I strongly believe that in the short run, for the next 3 years, and it's going to be a very rough 3 years of the Trump administration, his second term, it's going to be a very rough ride. Many countries are trying to see whether they can wait it out. Europe, as Nasim pointed out, in Europe, the reason why Europe started speaking out more and more for a ceasefire was that because we've seen Western capitals, the streets of Western capitals, from Amsterdam to Paris and others, that had many, protests during opposing the Gaza genocide, and so that may be a silver lining, because these are citizens of these countries that will vote in elections to come. There are many dynamics to this, internally and externally to the United States. There are many dynamics. Whether the global South can rally against this board of peace, whether the BRICS can rally against, if it has any muscle, to against the board of peace. These are also elements that we need to take into consideration. So there'll be a number of interesting academic papers and analysis over the next months and years to come as to how successful it is, whether it can succeed in effectively sidelining the United Nations, because the United States has, I think, if my stats are correct, has withdrawn from about 31 UN organizations or affiliated organizations. It's around 31 or so, or direct UN organization. So, whether Trump can plant the seeds for the future, whether successive administrations will take this up. I know internally and externally there will be some attempts to stall this implementation of board of peace. But as Nasim rightly points out, in the short term, there is no silver lining. But in the longer term, required that we rally behind and against challenges or changes to the world order.
Yes, Nasim, just looking at the easy way out for somebody like Benjamin Netanyahu, and with the constitution of this board of peace, basically he's being allowed to get scot-free without accountability. And we know the case is there for him in the ICJ as well. But again, this is now a man that is just going to walk away. The board of peace has been now constituted. He's again in control. We've heard so much about the yellow line. We've heard so much in terms of what his plans are, biometrics, the control of the population of Gaza, all of that. I mean, all of these discussions are actually taking place right now. And now we're seeing, this man still in control, still in charge, and still getting away scot-free.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Netanyahu and Israeli society, by and large, they'll be really high on power now. They've seen what they're capable of doing. They've committed a genocide. There's been no restraint. They've bombed their neighbors, 5 of the 3 countries in the region. They've taken more land in Syria, and they've done all that. And they're now seeking to depose another country, Iran. So they are really, really high on power. And this is why I say it's a dangerous moment for the region when you have a country which has gone crazy with a sense of its own invincibility. I think that's when it becomes vulnerable. And the people see this. I don't think the world is looking at this and thinking, "Wow, Israel." Yes, there are sections of that, some elements on the right who see Israel as the champion of the free world, and they'd like to be like Israel, invincible, being able to do whatever they want. That's what they are aspiring for, which is why I mentioned that conference in Jerusalem from yesterday. These are the far right parties who have roots in Nazism and fascism, and they would be looking at Israel and this alliance and thinking, okay, the world is ours now. But I think you'll also see a massive backlash. People have seen that Israel is not in control, cannot be controlled. Israel has become a pariah state. I think if you were to do an opinion poll in every single country, they'd realize that a rogue state like Israel is not safe, not just for the region, but for the world at large. Just as a rogue America is really a risk, not just to Muslim countries or Latin America, but Europe now as well. If you have a rogue America, it's a disaster for the globe, more so than Israel. Israel is a rogue state, but it's a small state. But the superpower like the US, when it becomes rogue, there's tough questions that needs to be asked, which is why now Europeans are seeking to, as I said, wean themselves away from dependencies on the US. And that conversation has started. I think it's going to become a process now where in the next 2, 3, 4 years, they will be looking at all the different ways they can wean themselves away from American dependencies. And that can only be, I would say, a good thing. America, by becoming less of an influential force over the Europeans, over the rest of the world, because other countries have weaned themselves of American dependencies, I think it becomes weaker. And as a result, Israel becomes weaker. A weak America is a weak Israel, in my point of view. So in the long term, as I said, there is no silver lining in the short term. But the conversation that's taking place, the strategic calculations and thinking that's taking place is one where people are seeing that a rogue state like Israel is an instability, not just for the region, but the world. And a rogue state like the US is something we need to safeguard ourselves against. And we need to think of ways to wean ourselves away from dependencies on America. So these conversations are taking place. It's just been a few months. I think, as I said, in the next few years, European powers, not just the Middle East, will be looking at ways to, address these issues I've just mentioned.
Well, inshallah, obviously, we will have this discussion sometime in the future as well. But for now, unfortunately, we've run out of time. But Nasim, Ahmed, Jazakallah so much for taking time out. And also to you, Dr. Ahmed, Jazbhay, we do appreciate both of you taking time out for us right here at Salam Media. And we wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's edition of In Conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi. And once again, it's been wonderful connecting with our listeners, our viewers on the various platforms, Salam Media. Remember, you can catch us still on YouTube if you have missed this podcast, and also on some of our other social media platforms as well. So you can continue following us at Salam Media on air. And with that, I'm going to be signing off. Once again, please take care, and we will continue, inshallah, until we meet again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.